Welcome to another edition of Inside the War Room. Ryan Ray here as always. And today we're kind of changing it up a little bit, which is part of the reason I started this podcast, which is to be able to have interesting conversations that are outside of what I talk about in other shows. And so I'm thrilled to have on the executive director of I was going to say Pain USA because I had the website pulled up
Sure.
here. Darren Redmond, who's the executive director. Darren, why don't you just hop on and tell us a little bit about the organization, and let's get into it.
Well, thank you, Ryan, and I'm very happy to be here with you. Pain was founded, it's a nonprofit, founded out of Fresno in 2009 by Flint Anderson, and he's the president and founder and still with us today and doing some great work. He had a decades-long addiction to opioids and stumbled and tried to get better. And when I tell you a struggle, he was forging scripts and doctor shopping and all the stuff you see in the movies that's very, very real. But it wasn't until 2001 that he got clean and sober. So in about 2009, he started to do speaking engagements, talking about his story and try to help some people. And more people would come up to him and say, hey, what do I do in this situation? I have somebody, what do I do in this situation? Because there's still a taboo, even in 2021, about admitting to your friends or your coworkers that somebody is struggling with an addiction. So he started the nonprofit, him and a friend of his, and we've grown exponentially. We've helped over 6,000 people. I came on as executive director about a year and a half ago. And our goal is very simple. You have somebody or you have an organization here to help you navigate all of this stuff. Because what do, right? You need a gardener. You either look on Google or you ask a friend. How do you ask a friend? Oh, by the way, Ryan, it was great watching the home run derby last night. Who do you know to help with an opioid addiction? And so there's a need out there for what we provide. And we can talk about some other stuff later, but that's the genesis of who we are. And very humbly, I say the California State Assembly just gave us recognition as the nonprofit of the year for California, which,
oh, wow. Congratulations.
Which is pretty nice.
Okay, so let's talk about addiction. What is addiction? How do you define it? This is a term that if you think about it, it's just thrown out there and you're an expert on it. So help me understand when you say addiction,
Right.
what does that mean? And how does a common person like me look for signs of addiction or maybe we're called addiction, but don't even realize it?
Sure. Addiction, this is Darren Redmond's definition, and it's a bit nebulous, but you have no control over your compulsion to want to use whatever it is, whether it's drugs, pornography, work addiction, addiction to whatever the case may be, and what's deemed unhealthy. When it controls you, when you are doing an interview with Ryan and the only thing you're thinking about is finishing up so you can go back to whatever it is that you are addicted to. That's a very malleable, but a way that I define addiction to be.
That's helpful and interesting at the same time because it could be that you're addicted to your work or something, and you're not, you're like, oh my gosh, all I got to do is work. You think of work as a positive, but all of a sudden the addiction is transforms the way that you operate because you can't focus on anything but getting back to where you were.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, and there are cases of that where you talk to some people and they are working 14 hours a day and they're sacrificing their home life, their children, or whatever the case may be, or just a simple fact that they have a fear of rejection. And so it's not really that they want to excel at their job and maximize the skill sets that they have to help them get to where they want to be in life. Rather, they are just that work could be forever because they're just afraid of being rejected. So that kind of falls into some of those parameters of I am addicted to be needed as opposed to going out there and taking risks.
So you mentioned the opioids, and this is kind of a thing was really pre-COVID, kind of a big news story. It's died down some. How did we get to this spot? Is it a problem with big pharma putting out too many drugs, doctors over prescribing, people just in a bad spot needing them? What's kind of your read on this?
The answer is D, all of the above. You can harken back to opioids have always been around. There has always been a problem. Again, usually Ryan is injured playing a travel sport. He's 15 years old or he's 25 years old, and he is taking a painkiller. We've had that, and we've had people on heroin forever, unfortunately. Heroin used to be legal in the late 1800s. But what really happened in the early 2000s is Big Pharma came out and said, we have the cure-all, we have the magic pill, we have this oxycodone and OxyContin and some of these other pharmaceuticals that will make you feel better and you can't be addicted to it, which was just a big lie. If you look at some of the research, there was more and more incentives and bonuses to get doctors to prescribe this magic drug. And we know about these people who are famous and sport people who got addicted to this stuff because, as Flint Anderson, our founder, talks about, is what happens is you start to feel like, I never not want to feel this way again. And then there's this horrific nexus that happens. After a while, it's not that you want to feel that way, but you get so dope sick that from when you're coming off of these pills that you almost just don't want, it's not even that you want the high as much as you don't want to be sick. And it is just this horrific double punch to the face that causes this addiction. It is horrible. It is tragic. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about the fentanyl situation. So you had these pills being prescribed. And then you had people who would do this, that doctors would give 30 pills for a injury that maybe you should have had 5 days worth of pills for. Now, what do you do with these extra pills? Well, they start handing them out to their friends because they're even the people that have the best intentions are now saying, hey, this worked for me, I have some left over. People started selling them. You have situations, especially on the East Coast, where you had some elderly people driving down Florida to sell these pills. You could sell them, but the people were selling them online. And all you had to do is tell the doctor, I have pain, I need more. So you had this legal, and I use the air quotes, drug pushes out there. And now these people are hooked. And now what? Well, you know, I no longer can get the prescription. I'm going to go do some other things. And then you'd be amazed, but they go to things that end up with methadone and heroin. And now, you know, Janie bar the door. And that dovetails, unfortunately, into the press pills and some of this other stuff that's going on in society today. And we have the unfortunate incidents that we have right now.
Okay, let's talk about that mentality. So the closest thing I would think of to that, you're kind of dreading it, is I used to dip tobacco, and you know, we're through quitting a couple times, but every time you think about it, you think about, oh man, it's gonna be hard to sleep for a while, or what am I gonna do when I'm doing this? Or it's weird. The brain thinking about
Mhm.
quitting starts to tell you, this is what you're gonna do. This is what I'm gonna
For
do
sure.
if you want to get off this substance. I can't imagine on something like a prescription pill or something hard drugs, how much the psychology behind it is, because it's got to be a tough situation. And I've often wondered, and this is just from the layman's no experience, would it be better to try to take these people who are trying to transition off and almost take them to a remote area so that they have to kind of go through the detox process, or is detox not the way? Because I know there's other, what's the drug that they'll give them that kind of replaces the high, oh gosh.
Suboxone?
I thought it started with an M. Maybe it's Suboxone, but anyway,
Methadone?
yeah, methadone. And so, what are your thoughts on that? Because I can't imagine this, if you're addicted to something like OxyContin, just the brain, the kind of pressure it puts on you when you think about quitting.
Right. Well, again, part of this problem that we have started with the fact that it was supposedly the magic pill and there was no side effects. And the truth is, we need there's sort of a duality here. For the people that started their journey in addiction through physicians, and again, I'm not blaming all physicians, of course. here's what has to happen. Instead of giving Ryan 30 days worth of supply, we have to say, Ryan, here's 3 days worth of supply. And then you come back, and I'm sorry, it might be inconvenient, but you come back and let's reassess and go from there. Instead, we have this culture in America that says, finish all of your medicine. Or we want to help people. You know what? Your copay is so expensive. They're just going to give you a prescription for this anyway. I have it. Here you go. Now, how you get off of it, unfortunately, takes a lot of time, and you have to go through hell for a while sometimes, but it's worth it. And, people can't, unfortunately, unless they're going to detox facilities, they can't just stop what they're doing. And there's ways of outpatient to try to get people to detox through outpatient work so they can still go back to work. And then there's people that are going to need detox. But surrounding yourself with people that are going to say and try to regulate you, that say, listen, is this really painful? Or because after 3 or 4 days, 5 days, you can become dependent already. This stuff is so powerful. Now, that doesn't make you an addict, but it makes you dependent upon the pain relief, or you're wanting not to feel sick. And that really starts to blur the line.
So how effective is just the pure cabin in the woods with right people there with you, obviously? So just for people listening, when Ryan is speaking here, Ryan is just asking questions. So
I love it. This is the way we learn, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. So cabin in the woods, you and your doctor and a few friends go out there, and we're gonna just take you out there. You can't leave the cabin for 30 days. Like, is that a more effective strategy for some people or most people? Just because you can't access it, it's not there, and you completely detox it, or do the numbers say that no, it doesn't really matter? The not the partial detox, but the kind of detoxing in the work environment works as well. Is there any kind of magic bullet, if you will?
Well, I'll tell you this. Recent numbers tell us that to try to detox the first time is only successful 7% of the time. Now, they won't tell you this when they're trying to sell you 30-day detox for $40,000 and you get to ride a pony on the beach. Yes, the old school way works brilliantly many times, where you just sweat it out, and I've dealt with that. But there are times where a person needs a real detox facility. And by the way, you need to be very cautious about where you go, because if you ever seen a movie called Body Brokers by John Schwab, which is out right now, it talks about the money that is made in these facilities. Like, I'll give you a great example. Right? Did you know that somebody drug tests you at say a detox facility or an IOP? They can charge your insurance company anywhere between $600 and $2,000 for that drug test.
Really?
100%. Yeah. So I'm testing you, Ryan, because I'm going to test you 3 times this week because I want to make sure that you're healthy. Or do I want to make $6,000 off of you times the 30 people I have in my facility?
Right.
With the understanding there are wonderful detox facilities that do marvelous work and save people's lives. But much like anything else, we need to investigate, we need to ask questions. You need to just don't go on blind faith. And yes, to your point, a lot of times the cabin in the woods works wonderfully.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple things with the cabin in the wood thing that, first off, if you do kind of go through the exercise, it would seem that you are kind of committed, because there is,
Yes.
you're going out there with people who refuse to give you the drugs. You can't access them anywhere. You're kind of stuck. And so there's that. The other thing is, this is something that I'm curious about as well. I've heard my whole life, which is, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Is that the same for opioids and drugs in general, that once you're kind of an addict, you're always an addict? Or if you really do detox out, that you can take responsibility in the future?
Let me put it this way, and give you, if you need some latitude here. Have you ever walked into a store and turned down an aisle, say a supermarket, and turned down an aisle and caught a whiff of something, or something that appealed to you as a kid, whether it was a cereal box or milk or whatever the case may be? Well, imagine that literally on steroids when you are coming off of being an addict.
Mm.
You have that feeling, that sensation from a box of cereal you had when you were 7 years old.
Mm.
I'm a big advocate that stay away. Now, there are people, I've done it and I'm okay, and probably best served just to kind of do other things. And what we do here at Pain is we're not into temperance, where we're meaning you don't do anything, meaning alcohol. And we tell people, even if the person is an addict for opioids or for cocaine, try not to put any alcohol around them. But that doesn't mean that you and I can't go out and have a glass of wine, or with me, it's whiskey and a cigar. But yeah, it's best served to kind of stay away from those things. That's what makes, by the way, alcohol rehabilitation so tough. Because you and I are not going to finish this podcast and go out and see a bunch of opioid places up and down the street. We're not going to see cocaine factories, but we're certainly going to see a lot of beer, wine, and alcohol, or even cigarettes. That's what makes those kind of, especially alcohol addiction, so tough.
How much through this process is acknowledging the addiction? And I don't know if this is the right term. Is acknowledging the addiction as a failure, as a reality? How much does that tie into post detox success? Because I can see a scenario where someone goes, they detox, and then they're struggling, as you say, on all three. There's the whiskey or whatever, but maybe not having the mentality that they did fall for it once in the right mental state might make them more prone to fall for it again.
Right. Well, a couple of things with that. That's a great point. We here at Pain, and again, we just advocate. We advocate this. There's a difference between a setback and a relapse. Why? Because we're humans, and it happens, and it's unfortunate. And we're not condoning or not condoning. We choose to meet people where they are. But if you went and you fought the good fight, let's talk about the cabin in Texas that we were talking about earlier, and you're out there and you're sweating it out, and whether it's alcohol or whether it's opiates, and something happens, you have a life event, and nobody's saying that you should go back to that stuff, but you did. You found a pill on the floor that was yours, and you looked at it as a sign, and you took it. And you immediately, the next day called up your friend Ryan and go, Ryan, I screwed up. That does not throw all the good work that you did out. And
Right.
Shame on the family, shame on the company, shame on the sibling that would call you a failure for that. No, you fessed up. The problem comes is, well, I got away with it. Let me do it again. Now that's something different. So we try to explain the difference. So there are people that are into, I've been sober X number of days, and that's great if it works for them. But our belief is long-term goals beat short-term gains. And just because you had a setback doesn't mean you failed.
Yeah, it's so that long-term goal meets short-term gains. One thing I've kind of been more of a believer in over the years is this idea from the movie Patriot: aim small, miss small.
Oh, I love that movie, by the way.
Yeah, it's a good movie, great movie. And so, he's telling his sons, aim small, miss small. And I remember hearing that when I was came out in high school, I think, and I was kind of like, oh, that's kind of a silly saying. But the longer I've lived, which I'm still relatively young, but the longer I've lived, aim small, miss small, there's a lot of wisdom in there. And so, how does that apply to something like this? Because, to your point, if I just take that analogy, which is, Bob wakes up, his goal is to get to the day, or long-term goal is to do this, whatever. Then he fails. Well, the aim small, miss small there is, okay, when you have the failure, that's the small miss. So now we got to just recalibrate by talking to whomever it is we talk to about this, or how the process is. But if you don't have kind of these things categorized right or prioritized right, that's where you can get yourself into trouble.
Correct. No, yeah, absolutely. And what happens is, and it sounds like a bumper sticker, and sometimes people roll their eyes, but I didn't use yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if I'll use tomorrow, but I'm not using right now.
Mm-hmm.
You literally have to look at it that way. So, and if you did use, or you slipped, that was yesterday. Today, I'm going to try to do what I have to do. And there's so many, without getting into too many tangents, but there's so many social mores that you need to throw away when you're worried about your addiction and your long-term recovery. So, for example, Ryan, I think it's you really showing your mother disrespect by not going to that wedding party because whatever. But no, I can't be around those because a couple of the guys there I used to use
Right.
with, and there's triggers that might provoke me to do something I don't need to do. We have to start being less selfish by being selfish. You have to worry. So, for example, if somebody had a big communicable disease, would you ask them if they to come to the party? Well, so
Right.
you have to look at yourself like, I don't want to put myself in this position. I need to be, and there are some times where you're like, I just need to be by myself. I need to recalibrate because think about this. You see it in the movies, and it's so true. And again, Flint talks about this a lot. There is a romance between the addict and the addiction. They have a certain place that they would keep their cocaine. They had a certain bottle or pill collector that they would keep their opioids in. They would count it a certain way. I would have it after my coffee and before I did whatever it is I had to do. There is a romance and a dance to that stuff. So you're asking somebody to forever break up with something that has been a part of their life. And those triggers will come in the middle of the night. It'll come in all different ways. So what we need to do is try to teach people and families, because addiction is a family disease, meaning everybody's involved. If you have a significant other, a sibling, a child that is involved in addiction, it affects you. It's not just them.
Yeah, that's interesting. So one of the things I thought about, big sports fan, and so if the media kind of makes fun of coaches and athletes for we're going to take it one game at a time. We're focused on this. We're not talking about that. And listen, a lot of that is just speech that's not being actually followed. But the good organizations kind of follow those mantras, which is
Sure.
go to time. You don't dwell on something for 24 hours. And there is a sense in which that's how they have to move from one step to the next, because if they get carried away on, what's life gonna be like 6 weeks from now, who am I playing or whatever, they get distracted. And so
Yep.
it sounds like kind of doing this. Have you found that athletes are able to navigate the addiction process a little bit better, or is it harder on them, or any insights on that?
I think it's outstanding that you bring up that point because I don't know if there's been any studies that would bring that up. However, athletes understand the one day at a time process. As a former Division I softball coach and I played college football, that was a mantra that was taught to us because it was very, very true. Next week's opponent might be sitting in a cover two. This week's opponent sits in a 5-2. So I have to and that's what people don't understand when they hear those things, right? We have to focus on what's in front of us. And sport people in addiction have a basic premise. So it's an easier premise to teach to sports people than it is for people in the general public. So you're actually right.
Yeah, I can see that, I also wonder it might be a strength or weaknesses. That hyper competitive people, if that helps them or if that works against them because of the way that sometimes athletes deal with failure is different
Mhm.
than the normal person. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and again, there's different variables, how they're raised and different things, and because there's no template, right? And as a person who has a libertarian way of looking at life, everybody is a little different. But that's why I always like to use the word, there are no rules as much as there are guidelines. And you might start at a premise that says, okay, this is probably happening because this person is an athlete. They may understand this premise. But for example, if you were a millionaire's son and you never had to deal with any adversity and you ended up addicted to something, that doesn't mean that it's going to be any easier or harder. It's just going to be different for you than somebody who's had to work through adversity and knows what it's like to be alone. And so you would present your options to that person differently, and you call upon that stuff. So again, somebody that never really faced any adversity or ever had to stand on their own, you have to help them understand what that looks like. Somebody who struggled their whole life, like I have a few friends of mine who played pro sports, who were never drafted. And the interesting thing is, a lot of them actually understood the pro game better when they got there because they had to face more adversity to get where they are. We had a conversation with Greg Camarillo, for example. Every year he had a fight for his job with the San Diego Chargers and the Miami Dolphins because he started as a backup on special teams. Then the person who came in as that number one ranked person, and then when he faced adversity for the first time, he or she didn't really know how to apply to it because their skills and their talents got them as far as they got to begin with.
Yeah, you do see that as sports that sometimes the guy Tom Brady talked about this the other day. He said, if he was a 6th-round draft pick, he doesn't know if he would have succeeded because it kind of put the chip on his shoulder. He had to study. He had to prove to everyone that he was as good as he thought he was. And listen, Peyton Manning's a 1st-round draft pick, so it goes a lot of different ways.
Sure.
So it just, to your point, it's not clear cut, and that's part of this mystery about addiction and drug use and stuff like this. Is it's not clear cut, and that's what makes it hard. And for people to kind of understand and get their grasp around it, makes it very nebulous. I think is the term maybe you used earlier. And so let's bring it to the family, because you mentioned it's a family problem. You know, when we're talking about opioids, are we mainly concerned with this crisis being, late teenagers, early college age students, or is it hitting everyone pretty much equally throughout the ages?
That is an outstanding question. If somebody has to look no further than the recent opioid statistics in California, and they're up online, and you can take a look at them. Did you know that actually the people that get more addicted to opioids are the 60 and over crowd? The younger people, it comes second, the 18 to 35. And here's why. I don't know you, you're a young man, but I'm sure you have people around you. Did I take my cholesterol pill today? Did I take my blood pressure pill today? I'm not sure. So they double up. Well, that happens a lot of times when you're older with the opioid pain prescriptions that you get, again, for all the right reasons, and you double up, or I forgot, or did I take it this morning? I'm not sure. And you take 2 back to back. And what happens is you actually enjoy the feeling that you have, and now Janie barred the door. And that happens more than you know. In fact, in California, now, if a doctor, if you're of a certain age and they feel compelled to do so, will say, right, here is your prescription for this oxycodone. Here is your prescription for Narcan, which is an opioid reversal agent. Now, you don't need to cash that in, quote unquote, and get the prescription for Narcan, but they do it because so many older people actually overdose, or they become addicted to that stuff because of taking too many pills. And then close behind, by the way, is the young people, and they're dying, unfortunately, because of this fentanyl crisis that is just killing people. So that's the situation.
Yeah, so I want to talk about fentanyl, but you mentioned Narcan. And I hadn't heard that term until the George Floyd trial, and that was some discussion about, did they use it? Should they have used it? Could it have helped? And obviously, not asking you to wait on that, but what is this, and is it as powerful as people make it out to be? Because that was kind of the first time I'd ever really heard it being discussed.
Narcan, I'll just say it first and work my way back. We here at Payne, Flint Anderson, myself, we believe that Narcan should be in everybody's home. It is a Narcan, or naloxone, which is its pharmaceutical name, is an opioid reversal agent. So let me explain to you what that means. It only works on the opioid receptors in your brain. So if a child accidentally gets hold of your Narcan because it looks like an Afrin spray, and they take it, and there's no opioid in the system, it just rolls out. EMTs, they give people Narcan when they come and they have an overdose situation. First thing they do is hit them with the Narcan. So every EMT that you ever call your house for a overdose. Now, if you're overdosing on something else, it will just roll out the nose. But it is so powerful because, again, this is just my colloquial way of talking about it. So what happens is this: you take an opioid, whether it's fentanyl or heroin or oxycodone, you're overdosing. the opioid receptors in your brain are just fiending on that opioid. Narcan, which is an opioid reversal agent, for lack of a better term, fools the opioid receptors in your brain. So they say, what is this stuff? This looks delicious. Again, using metaphorically speaking. And for 10 to 15 minutes, it starts to feast on that stuff until it realizes that, no, you just tricked me. I'm going back to what I was. So it creates this window so EMTs can get you and help you live. We've had situations where people are blue and their breathing is shallow, and Narcan just brings them back to life. It is, now, a couple of caveats. There's always a case where you're too far gone. Or unfortunately, what happens sometimes is you administer Narcan to somebody and they get up and they're woozy and they say, oh, I'm good, thanks, man. And then 15 minutes later, they're back in an overdose again because there's still opioids in their system. So we always advocate for you to take them to the hospital anyway. And so all that has to happen is this: something happens in your house. Grandpa overdoses accidentally on their legal prescription. A child in your house crushed up some Xanax that was actually filled with fentanyl and overdosed while playing Xbox in their room. You hit them with that Narcan, and it will help to save their life. You'd be amazed, because I have to tell you, when you overdose on fentanyl or carfentanil, it is probably the most ghastly thing you'll ever witness, because what really happens is this: the lungs stop working. Basically, they're paralyzed, and using colloquial terms. And you choke to death on your own vomit, many times eyes wide open, and you feel every bit of it. It is a horrible death. We're doing a documentary right now called the Don't Hide the Scars Project, where we talk to 4 mothers who lost their children to accidental overdoses. In one situation, I'll give you the lady's name, Elaine Hudson. She lost her child. He was playing Xbox at night. He thought he was taking a Xanax, but it was really an illegally pressed pill filled with fentanyl. And at 2 a.m, his friends noticed that he stopped chatting it up during whatever game he was playing. She goes into his room the next day, breakfast or whatever the case may be. He's dead. Xbox headphones on, eyes rolled back in his head, sitting in his room, 12 feet from her room. And this has happened on numerous occasions. And there's a whole unfortunate, people are just turning their heads to the fact that this is happening. So Narcan will bring these people back to life, will give you an opportunity to do that. So as soon as you administer Narcan, you call up 911 and you say, I'm administering Narcan. What did it take? I'm not sure, but I'm giving it anyway.
Right.
And that will save somebody's life. We have a young lady here at Payne. Her name is Pamela Smith, and she is our operations manager. So when you call our office here, she answers the phone most times. Her child died from an accidental fentanyl overdose because the people that one of the reasons, the people that he was with when he had this bad reaction were so afraid to call the cops because somebody was getting in trouble that it took 40 minutes before they decided to get that person some help.
It's funny. I say funny. It's tragic you bring it up because I know someone where I used to live, and it was a group of, I would say they're probably 18, 19-year-olds. I can't remember, but somewhere in that age group. And they were out. They were kind of doing drugs. And I can't remember what happened. They kind of got sideways with each other. One of them shot the other one in the leg. And they had drugs and all kinds of stuff, and they wouldn't call the cops.
Yep.
They were afraid of probably the shooting, but also just the drugs and everything. But everything, when they got interviewed, there was a list of things that they were afraid of. And that's the tragic thing is you have someone here who might be dying, or in this case does die, and no one notifies because they're afraid of the secondary implications.
Yeah, and we try to teach people. That's part of what our mission. And we've had the Fresno County DA, Lisa Smithcamp, on numerous times. We've had Sheriff Mims on as well, to say, nobody's getting in trouble. We don't care. When it becomes an emergency situation, We just care about that and just save a life. Don't be so selfish that you let somebody die because you're afraid of getting in trouble because there's a drug paraphernalia, or in that case, an accidental shooting, if it was accidental, whatever.
Sure.
Live first.
Yeah. No, it's tragic. One of the things that I was, I went recently back and watched some OJ Simpson stuff, and
Sure.
so I was watching all the old court stuff is on YouTube. So I was watching some of the actual trial. I remember some of it, but kind of watching it. And so then I was looking up the various lawyers and what they're doing now. And Robert Shapiro, who is out in California,
Mhm.
his son turns out died of something very similar. He got addicted to drugs and alcohol, I believe, had a few relapses, and ultimately died of a drug overdose perfectly. Um, and just hearing him talk about it and just how hard it was and all the things they went through, it's one of those things that when you talk about going back to this family thing, the Narcan thing, the planning, the working through, it's almost a situation to where in 2021, maybe more families need to be having these discussions
100%.
about where they're at in life, what's going on, a lot more open honesty, and then even a little bit of preparedness in case something does go awry.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we kind of step back for a second. So Narcan, so you get that prescription. If you go to your local Walgreens, it's going to be about $130 for the box of Narcan. We here at Peen and other places too, many other places, we give it to you for free. We will literally give it to you for free. So now here's the paradigm that needs to be changed. I'm sorry if I use a word from 10 years ago, but it's important. We went to a local street festival with the goal of giving away, training people on how to administer it, 300 boxes of this stuff that is about $130 to get. You'd be amazed at how many people gave us this. Oh, I don't know anybody that takes drugs. Or, oh, I don't hang around those type of people. Or, you're just condoning drug use. No, I'm trying to make people live. And I've mentioned this previously. I had one guy that I could not believe. He said, looked me in the eyes and goes, oh, I got to carry that around all day. I'm sorry, it's 16 ounces. It's a lot lighter than a coffin.
No doubt.
Yeah. So
No doubt.
if I can share this with you, so I had a situation where I was talking to a gentleman, first generation immigrant, wonderful man. And we're working through the language difficulty because my Espanol Paquito.
Mhm.
And so we're talking and about what this is. And I get chills thinking about this. And he's like, no, I have a good boy. He's a good boy. And I'm saying, I'm sure he is.
Sorry, I have my phone.
No, I like that.
Well, we take calls on one of my podcasts. As I have my phone, so I forget that when it's paired up on here that people call me, it goes through. So apologies. Go ahead.
No, please. That's a good thing. I like the music background. So long story short, he's a good boy. And I'm saying, I'm sure he is, but accidents happen.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened was I said, just do me a favor. I said, talk to your son. And his son was about 16, and he was maybe 10 feet behind us talking to friends. I said, just ask him. Just ask him, would this be something that he would understand or he'd need or want?
Mm-hmm.
And I got to give this father credit. He went to his son, and his father came, and him and his son came back. And his son said, can I get some? I need this.
Wow.
And the father, holding his son's shoulders over his head, mouthed to me, thank you. That's what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's and just to make sure we're clear before we move off of the Narcan, to make sure that I understand correctly and the listeners do, it's not a life saver; it's a life
No,
extender, right?
yes, it gives you a window of time to get the medical attention that you're going to need.
Yeah, and so a couple things there, just get your opinion on it because
Sure.
again, the George Floyd trial, they're talking about this a lot. I'm like, what is this stuff? So I watched a little bit. A couple things. So, if you're using it at your house, obviously that's one scenario. But there was a question that was asked to someone that to the EMT, I believe it was, that, do you use this and people become violent? So just curious, if you're out in the street and you're carrying the
Oh, that's a great question, and it's true. It's part of my my training, Flint's training. He put this all together for us. Is that The answer is yes. There's 4 things that'll happen. One, we talked about, you and I. Hey, I feel great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I must have had some bad stuff. Let's just sit on the couch and whatever, talk about it, get a pizza. That happens very rarely, but it does happen. A lot of other times what happens is they're afraid and they literally are just crumpled up in a ball. And you have to just reassure those people. I want you to think about this. I don't want you to answer this question, but if you were ever drunk or high or whatever the case may be, imagine immediately going into detox, because that's what happens. The brakes go on. Then there's 2 other things that sometimes happen. One, they get up and the fight and flight response that we learned about in school, they run, they fight, they're afraid. They don't know why, just something feels weird. I'm getting out, I got to run out of my own skin. So you got to hold them down. Lastly, 100% very accurate, they'll fight. Now, that doesn't mean they get up and get in boxing stance and whatever. Sure. They're thrashing around. They're angry because they were high, and then the brain goes, what the heck just happened? And so if it's not flight, it's fight. So, that's very real.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about fentanyl here before we talk about your podcast, and then we'll wrap it up. So fentanyl term gets a lot. What is it? Why it's so important?
Fentanyl, and a lot of it has originated through China and come up in different ways through the southern border and through the ports. Is a synthetic opioid that is cheaply made and is horrifically deadly. Fentanyl is what's used right now by medical professionals when you have surgery or post-surgery. So there's a legitimate, real reason for fentanyl. But what's happening is this, and this is very, in my opinion, very, very interesting and very deadly. What's happening is, instead of getting that Xanax bar, they're now, these drug dealers are taking this fentanyl and they are incorporating it into these pressed pills, these M30 pills, Xanax, for example. So what happens is they want the intensity. They want you to come back. So when they're making these pills, instead of just some of the baby powder and some of the other garbage they're putting in there, they put in fentanyl, so you got the high. It's very cheap. It's not really Xanax that they're giving you. They're giving you this buffet of stuff that includes fentanyl. So what happens is it takes literally, not figuratively, literally as much of fentanyl that you can put on the head of a pin can kill you. So what happens is you and I are sharing a Xanax bar. We're sharing a pill. Your side might have very little of any fentanyl in it. My side has all the fentanyl. I die. We had a situation right down here in Visalia where that happened. So fentanyl is even being put in marijuana because and this is interesting. So marijuana is basically legal in California, right? You have these dispensaries. So you have a headache and you whatever. And there's very good reasons. I know people that use it. But here's what happens. You are a knucklehead drug dealer up the street. The government is actually taking your business away because the pot that I can get from the distillery, from a dispensary, is potent. So I got to up the dirty stuff that I have. I got to up my game. So they're lacing marijuana with fentanyl. So it has a bigger kick. Except they don't know what they're doing. They don't care that they killed Darren or Ryan.
Right.
They don't want to kill me, but they don't care if I do.
Okay. That was helpful. Let's see here. Let's talk about this podcast. Don't hide the scars. I was looking at that. You got a lot of big name guests. Obviously I have some ideas, but talk about the podcast.
Well, thank you for that. So a couple things. We had the idea, Flint actually had the idea of the Don't Hide the Scars podcast previous to the COVID situation. But once we had that COVID situation happen and things got shut down, and I really feel sorry for your business, what happened there. And you couldn't do in-person meetings anymore. So the fact that you and I would talk about recovery or we'd talk to parents, and there's so much information. For example, two of the four kids that died when we talked about this past year, the mothers, they had the fentanyl laced pills delivered to the person's house at night. And so we have this happening. How do we get this out? We got to tell people through a podcast, and they're paying for it with Venmo. And so they have these apps that people are using, and there's code words that they use. So anyway, so that was the genesis of the discussion. And then we figured out that people want to be entertained, they want to be informed, and we want to show that addiction and troubles with drinking and drugs is open to everybody. Everybody knows somebody. So that's why we brought in these different people, and we've had some really big name guests, and they've come on and they just talk about whatever it is. And sometimes we talk a little bit about recovery. Sometimes we talk a lot about recovery. We have people on, unfortunately, like Andrew Pollock, whose daughter was murdered in the shootings in Florida, where 16 or 17 kids were killed. And we talked, and he shared with us on the podcast how dirty he felt, and he was proved correct, that the school administration was there. And a month and a half later, they arrested the head of the school system over there because the security measures that were supposedly paid for with public funds were never installed. So we kind of open up these gamuts, because here's the thing: if you're going through recovery, or your family is working through it, you also want to be entertained, you want to be informed. So that's the reason we're doing it.
Yeah, that's that makes a lot of sense, because it's a thing where you look at it and you say, sometimes just talking about something so heavy constantly makes things more heavy. And so yes, so to do that is a fantastic idea. And obviously, someone who'd been podcasting now for some time, big fan of more podcasts. And that's one thing I always tell people. They're like, oh man, more podcasts, like, well, the more the merrier, because that brings more people that will listen to your show, will find other shows, or vice versa. So it's a good medium. It's allow a lot of voices out there, and a lot of information. I've learned so much. I've met so many people through podcasting. It's unbelievable medium. So we'll make sure we link to that in the show notes. But before we let you go, give one final plug for anyone out there who wants to know more about the organization. They want to work with you guys. You got a referral program. You got all kinds of stuff going on. Go ahead and hit that pretty hard right now so we don't miss it.
I appreciate that. And again, thank you for your time today with you, and it's enjoyable. If you want to learn more about what we do, call us, 559-579-1551. The phone will ring here at the office, or go right to my cell phone. You can find out more information online at www.gotpainusa.org. Follow us on social media, and we're here to help you.
Okay, very good. And we will link to the website and any of the social media stuff we have in the show notes so people can check it out. And again, if there's something that's touching you, that go ahead and start the process now. Don't wait until it's too late. In the meantime, if it's not, you don't think it is affecting you, it's still something that you need to start. Like the whole Narcan thing. Like, now that I'm aware that exists, it changes how you view things, because I had no idea that was even a viable option. But now knowing it's like, okay, well, how do you get it? Where can you store it? Now you're learning from you that I can ask an expert about it. So that's the process that we all have to do to educate ourselves. So thank you so much for coming on. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.